Hello everybody. I have never ever sat in a Lamborghini Murcielago before. That is until today, and now I'm driving one. Not just any old Murcielago, I'm driving an SV, the daddy. This is quite an intimidating experience, it must be said, for a number of reasons. First off, this is the first V12 Lambo I've ever driven. Secondly, its very kind owner Richard has just told me how much it's insured for, and it's a lot of money, a lot more than I actually thought. I'm also on somewhat unfamiliar roads, and these are not exactly small cars, although that being said, in the flesh it doesn't actually seem quite as massive as you think that it might. But from in here, this does indeed feel like a big old bus, and it's pretty stiff, low-slung, and it feels impossibly wide too. I am on a road which I'm convinced is far, far too narrow for this and anything else. Visibility is also criminally bad. Right side is just about okay. Left, absolutely abysmal. Come on, James, get it together. So, Murcielago SV, what's the deal? Well, this is the last of line, the very final iteration in the Murcielago lineage. It's also the swan song for the fabulous V12 Bizzarini engine that started life in the Miura. Here stroked out to over 6 litres and producing 670 horsepower, as indicated by its official name, the LP670-4, the 4 being a wheel drive, and the LP, in case you're wondering, being longitudinally positioned, i.e. the engine is straight, because the first versions of this engine actually went transverse. They were sideways in the back of the old Miura. Quite amazing, right? Yeah, not many cars give me nerves the way that this thing does. I'm really... Fortunately, I'm following Richard in his Aston Martin GT8, and if you want to know more about his incredible selection of cars, of which this is just 2 of many, check out his YouTube channel, which is Challenge the Road. He's only just started, but he's got some amazing features coming up, which I know are going to be very exciting, and if you like me, I'm sure you'll enjoy what he's got to do as well. The SV part of this car's name stands for Super Veloce, in other words, ruddy quick. It's also part of a long line of SVs, including the Diablo SV, possibly my ultimate poster car, and the Miura SV. The Countach, I think, missed out on that title. Of course, the Aventador got one as well, but that and this are very different beasties. Now, a lot of people will say that the Murcielago is the last Lamborghini made before Audi got their meddling hands all over the place. But that's not really strictly true. In fact, by the time this car came out, Audi had already owned Lamborghini for the best part of half a decade. And I've got to say, when you're driving this, it doesn't feel particularly German. Now, I've not gone anywhere near the throttle, but you can tell that this is a car with some pretty serious abilities. Now, this one's mostly standard. Not that you'd really want to do an awful lot to a Murcielago SV. The one change has been the obligatory exhaust. This one's got a Larini on it, which produces so much heat along with the rest of the car that the number plates on the back melt. There's about 4 spare number plates in the front of this because, genuinely, seriously, the heat on this car will melt the rear number plate and it will just fall off. About every 3 months this happens, so I am told. The dials are amazingly old school. They really do feel more 2001 than 2010. I really love the big and very clear gear shift indicator for this E-gear box, which I believe was the only choice of transmission for the SV. Now, I've got quite a bit of experience with these gearboxes, so I know that when you're driving gently, the key to smoothness is to lift off, certainly on the upshifts. Downshift, yeah, same thing. Just lift on a downshift and you're going to get on much better with it. steering's got a decent weight to it, and this steering wheel is covered in Alcantara and has completely disintegrated. This is why I don't like Alcantara, because this happens to it. There were originally 6 of these cars made for the UK market, and it's believed that perhaps only 3 or 4 are still remaining. Now, for Quirks and Features fans out there, the Murcielago does not disappoint. Now, it may be clad in carbon fibre, with all body panels bar the doors and roof being made out of it, but the core of the car is actually a steel tubular chassis, much like its predecessors going back to the Miura. The SV, though, uses high-strength steel, being both a bit lighter and stiffer. The 6.5 litre engine is mounted in the back, where of course you'd expect to find it in a supercar, but bizarrely the gearbox sits ahead of that, normal for a Lamborghini apparently, but not anybody else. Originally, global production for the SV was planned at 350 cars, and a plaque inside said as much. However, only just over half of those were actually ever made. Now, Lambo claimed that the early stop was to make way for the incoming Aventador, and I'm sure that the effects of a global financial crisis on the £300,000 V12 supercar market were purely coincidental. But perhaps my favourite bit about the Murcielago SV is the windows. They've sharpened them. They're just little transparent knives when you lower them, sticking out where your arm can get sliced on them. Whose idea was that? As standard, the SV got carbon ceramic brakes, which were optional on the regular Murcielago, and I have to say they're not actually that bad. It's usually doing this kind of stuff around town where these are at their worst, and actually, as long as you're fairly gentle on your first press, they're pretty good. Right, let's hold back, and now she's warm, I'll give the thing a little bit of a prod, shall we, and see what she's like. Now, power is actually very linear, very progressive. And there's a second wind sort of around 6,000 RPM. I couldn't tell you exactly what, because my eyes are fixed on the road. And what's actually impressing me is that when you get up a little bit of speed, the car's not ludicrously stiff. I mean, it's very firm, don't get me wrong, but actually, I'm kind of starting to enjoy myself now. Oh, it's still nervy though. This car is very long geared, so I haven't really even been into fourth yet because there's just simply no need for it. Oh, it sounds like a Lambo, should I have to say. In terms of the engineering that went into the SV, I don't think it's anywhere near as in-depth as many other special editions, like probably even the modern SVJ, or the Challenge Stradale, or the 430 Scuderia of the time, of which, incidentally, Richard also owns an example. It was just to give it a bit more power, take a bit of weight out thing. It does feel pretty special in here. Slightly cheap and nasty feeling steering wheel aside, and Rover heater controls, same as you'll find in a Zonda. But there are acres of carbon. In fact, I'm pretty convinced that the little flap of carbon that says Lamborghini that covers the heater controls are probably more expensive than the actual heater controls underneath. At just over 4,000 miles, this is also one of the lowest mile examples of SVs in the world. Oh God, I love my job. I just want empty roads. That's all I want right now. Empty roads, 60 mile an hour limit, so I can let this poor thing off the leash because I can feel it sort of straining a little bit. Speaking of straining, these seats I'm actually getting on with reasonably well. However, I am absolutely flabbergasted, this being the first time I've ever sat in a Murcielago, remember, at how small it is in here. Now, the Gallardo, I drove the Superleggera recently, was a pinch. I mean, my hair was touching the ceiling. And this is the same. How? How, Lamborghini, have you managed this? How have you made a car so big with bucket seats, with nice things? There's not like there's, 4 inches of padding in these things, because there's definitely not. But how have you made this car so small inside? Now here's where I'd like a bit of feedback from you all. You see, this being a last-of-line car, it demonstrates many of the very typical things that a last-of-line sports car will have, especially these old-school ones that lasted a long time. You start off with a fairly pure design. I mean, the original Murcielago is actually a somewhat understated car as Lamborghinis go. Then it grew different things, it sprouted extensions and got a bit more angry. Not perhaps in the same way as the Countach or Diablo. In fact, the Diablo, I could say, actually became a little more conservative as it aged. But the Countach certainly didn't. That became wilder and wilder. And in many cars, I would say that actually that ruins the looks of something. I think it's just not the way that they should be. But somehow with a Lamborghini, especially one like this, I think the more stuff you stick on it, the more machine guns, the more turrets and rocket launchers and cannons and things like that, I think the better it gets, because they are just lunatic machines. That's simply what they are. End of. And there's still actually, and please, I know this is a stretch, I know, I think there's actually a bit of a purity and a subtlety to this shape. Yes, it's got this fabulously huge rear wing at the back, but actually the overall shape, I think, is quite elegant. Even the bat wings don't want to come up. I've asked them many, many times because, you know, that would be showy, wouldn't it? In typical Lamborghini or old school Lamborghini fashion, the buttons in this thing are strewn everywhere. Much like the Gallardo, the reverse button, for some reason, is over there. Triply frustrating when there's actually a nice blank button in the middle here where it could go quite happily between the Corsa and the traction off buttons. I must say, I'm actually quite enjoying the steering in this car. Got a real decent sense of connection with the road. The weighting's just about perfect. I'm getting some real genuine texture through it too. Now that's impressive considering it has four-wheel drive, which rarely helps steering feel, and it's still, despite the lightweight elements, a bit of a heifer. And this car weighs in at a real 1,750 kilos. Through that bend, oh, it's really quite good. As a gentleman that I know who described his Murcielago, of all things, and cars are about expectations. That's what they're all about. You know, what do I expect the Murcielago SV to be like? Well, loud, check. Very bright and bold and impressive and full of wings and carbon, check. And I expect it to be intense, very fast, check. But I did not expect it to be, and this is what my friend described his original Murcielago as, a driver's car. Now, I haven't really had much chance to put this car through its paces, I'll be honest, and I may not even call this a review, I might call it simply a first drive, but actually, I think there is a real chance the Murcielago actually could be something of a driver's car. Nice and tight, come through. Yeah, you feel the front move a little. I mean, I'm being really gentle on the car. I'm just not pushing it. I haven't got the space to push it right now. But it does talk to you, and you know that you're so far away from its limits, which is very impressive. And believe me, I know there'll be a lot of people that say, oh, you can never really tell what a car's like until you're absolutely thrashing it. And there's a definite truth to that. You certainly wouldn't know what its on-limit behaviour is like driving at these kind of speeds. But you do get a feel for its sense of connection and how it talks to you, and that is important because that you need to know. That a car has to communicate clearly if you actually want to know where the limits really are. And this car, at a fraction of its ability, is doing that pretty effectively. The E-gear gearbox does make the odd clunk, especially when it's changing from second to first as you approach a junction, and it's a horrible noise because in my mind it sounds like one of my action cams falling off. Oh, not doing my life expectancy any good. At junctions and things with the E-gear box, you try and avoid creeping, because when you do that, it's working the clutch and it will chew through them pretty fast if it wants to. So what you want to do is you want to either go or don't go. Don't just sort of creep along. That's not good for it. It's shifting up at about 7.6. which is odd. I don't know why it's doing that. Do I need to be in Corsa mode perhaps to get it to let me rev that high? I don't know. Oh Jesus, in Corsa that gear shift is a bit brutal. And does it change the exhaust? It seems to be crackling a lot more. Like all quad cam multi-cylinder engines at low RPM, it certainly moves, but you really do need to let it sing in order to get the very best for it, and believe me, there's a real reward for doing that. Actually, it is only when you're at the absolute red line, which seems to change every few minutes, that the car will shift brutally. I was in Corsa mode there, and it was actually a fairly slick shift for a single clutch box. Not dual clutch rapid, it wasn't a snap, but it was still pretty good. Just keep getting glimpses of this thing at its absolute best, and it's like looking in the top of hell, just sort of peeling back a roof tile and going, oh blimey, there's naughty things going on in there. Below 4,000 RPM. If you drove one of these cars on an experience day where that's your change up point, you haven't driven this car at all. In fact, I'd say it's only when you get it to 6, then she comes alive. And she's angry. And she feels like she starts to float and fly. And the road starts to mean less and less to her. Ooh. I love Lotus still. One thing has occurred, and that's the fact that I've actually started to relax in this car, and that makes all the difference. Started to enjoy it, and I'm grateful for the all-wheel drive system as well, because even on a day like today, a two-wheel drive car with this amount of power on broken roads can get hairy pretty fast. In fact, having all-wheel drive on a Lamborghini reminds me of something I was told at an alligator farm in Florida. We haven't tamed them, we've just trained them. And that's what I think Audi did with the V12 Lamborghinis. This car is fun, it has to be said, but my life, these roads are not the place for it at all. No wonder Richard Hammond took it to Abu Dhabi and then had the place closed off for his enjoyment. Sure you think it's the best thing ever then? The Murcielago SV is clearly a wonderful car with far more depth and character than I'd probably ever give it credit for. However, today I feel like a 16-year-old who's just discovered the high-numbered channels on the skybox. I'm not quite sure what I'm looking at, but it's very exciting and I want to see more. I just don't have the credit card or the bill payer's permission to find out what it's all about. So today is a first drive, and I desperately want to get back in the seat of another V12 Lamborghini. Hopefully, I shan't have to wait too long. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you all for the next one. Bye-bye.